Alright, I'm going to make another build guide for Season 4, just to go over a few things that I had changed with my build compared to my previous one. It's not a lot, it's really just a small thing, but I might as well just redo the build, just kind of go over everything again, just for the sake of consistency. So, the Rapier, um, you know, still going to be wanting to use Rogue. That should be the highest priority perk. Second perk should be a weapon perk, either Sun Riposte or Omnidirectional Evade. Third perk can either be Vicious, Keen, Keenly Empowered, Keenly Jagged. So those are your options there. For the secondary weapon, you can either use the Spear, which I think is the best play, but you can also use something like the Warhammer, the Great Axe if your team needs to use one of those. So like Great Axe is good for utility, so obviously that would be an option as well, but it's not the preferred choice. Obviously you'd much rather want to use a spear, and in some situations where you're like soloing something, a Warhammer is really good too. Those are the two main options. Another main option would be bow for bosses that have wide hitboxes like Thorpe. The bow is really good there. And then you have some kind of like offbeat choices. Ice Gauntlet, I would say, is kind of offbeat now. I don't really think the Ice Gauntlet is that good with this build because, like I said in my previous guide, you don't really get much from it. Like, you get DOTs, sure, and you get Ice Shower, which is decent. But other than that, there's not much going for it. If you compare it to something like the Spear, which has Sweep, Perforate, and Skewer, which apply a ton of debuffs with all of these, and a bunch of buffs and everything, like, it just makes a lot more sense to use something like this. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned in my previous guide, I don't know if I was using Vault Kick before, but Sweep is definitely the play nowadays with this build. It covers a lot of the bases that were not covered before, which was like having the ability to have a knockdown effect, which was AoE. So with Vault Kick was single target, and it really didn't accomplish the task of what I wanted it to do, which was stunning enemies, and Sweep is much better at that. And the only difference between these two is that you cannot Sweep doesn't prevent grit. So like if you sweep on an enemy that has grit, it's not going to knock them down, while Vault Kick would stop their grit. But it generally, you're going to get most enemies to be knocked down from this, so it's the better play for sure. And that is probably the gist of it. I'll just show this Warhammer tree as well. The bow tree, this is what I prefer for the bow. Void Gauntlet, I actually don't think Void Gauntlet is that good as a secondary, so I would avoid that. Ice Gauntlet, maybe. Like, maybe you could use this. But yeah, those are your main options there. For stat distribution, you're going to be wanting to use 350 dex, 200 int, 61 con. Basically what you're going for here is 350 dex, 200 int, and the rest in con is kind of the way to look at this. And, excuse me, if you're doing M3s, this is also what you want to do. So in my previous guide I said 100 con, which I'm not sure why I thought that. Maybe I just had cold feet from the new M3s, but you definitely don't need 100 con with this build. So I would say 61 con, or just, you know, whatever con you end up with at the end there is what you should be using. You'll also notice I'm using full rune glass in my build. In my previous guide I was not, and this is kind of a risk-reward thing. So you're going to get a trade-off with an extra 10% damage, but you're also going to lose out on some elemental protection. So your protection won't be as high, but you'll gain some more damage from that. So it's definitely, you know, like I said, a risk-reward thing. But I think it's worth it if you can play really good. This kind of ups the skill ceiling for this build, but it allows you to put in more DPS. Like, even I was just running an M2, and I was stealing aggro from the tank. So yeah, this is a very, very strong and deadly build that does a ton of damage now. I guess I'll cover the armor too just briefly. So main priority perk obviously is Leeching Flurry. Make sure you have that. Then Omnidirectional Evade. Those are the two most important perks because obviously all your damage comes from the Rapier. If you use this build, that's 95% of the damage right there. Another really important perk would be Fortifying Perforate. This isn't as important, but it's gonna come in handy sometimes, so it's worth having if you can get it. But yeah, those are probably the 3 weapon perks that you need. Other ones don't really matter. I don't know if I covered the spear yet, so I'll do that now too. You want Enfeebling Skewer for sure. That's like highest priority. If you don't have it, then you need a new spear. So make sure you have Enfeebling Skewer. Second perk that you would definitely want to prioritize would be Refreshing Move. I feel like that pairs really well with this build because excuse me, it your spear is going to be used for debuffs and buffs, so you're not going to be using your spear for damage. So by having Refreshing Move, you can make sure that your abilities are off cooldown as much as possible, which is what your spear is used for, and then immediately you can swap back to your Rapier. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. And then Keen as the third perk is probably the best option because critical hits with the spear give you stamina. So I like having Keen on my spear. And then for Amulet, obviously you want the Protection perk and Health. Third perk, not as important. Could be Refreshing. You have a lot of options with that. Excuse me, sorry, I'm coming off a cold right now. And then the ring is really good here. I replaced this recently. I got really lucky with this. I bought off the market for super cheap. And it has Hardy Leeching and Arcane Damage, which is the best you can get for this build. And then the earring, definitely want Refreshing Toast. Definitely want Purifying Toast. Purifying Toast is actually not as important now. It used to be more important because before you couldn't get this, which was weapon swapping will cleanse all stun and root crowd control status effects. But now that we have that on the Dex ability thing, this isn't as important, but it's still decent to have. The earring is not as big of a priority as opposed to something like the ring. The ring is probably the highest priority to get the perks correct on, so I guess just recognize that. And food, you want to be using Banana Pudding. Heart Rune, Detonate, still want to be using Detonate. Really hard to compete with this Heart Rune. It's just the best option in most cases. So yeah, I think that's about it. The main thing that changed from my previous guide was this this rune glass, and the fact that I'm running 60 con or whatever. And yep, definitely one of the strongest builds in the game. So yep, hope you enjoyed. See you guys later.